freehold doesn't mean that all freehold you buy is definitely a better buy than a landed. So if you doesn't have the income, so how to buy landed? I was able to help them buy landed. They tend to use a large amount of the CPF to clear their loan.
Welcome everyone. Today I have with me someone who has carved out a very distinct space in the Singapore property market. Not as a typical agent, but as what I'd describe as a property strategist. He works specifically with first-timers and homeowners who are trying to find the right direction and the best option to take in their property journey. And he helps them make decisions with clarity rather than pressure. Jason Tan, welcome. Jason, most people in Singapore think of a property agent as transactional, someone who helps you buy or sell. But you describe yourself as a property strategist. What does that actually mean? And what made you decide to position yourself that way?
Well, in the past, people buy and sell property purely just by getting an agent in, putting it in the market, advertising on papers, and then getting buyers to view, and then they transact and sell the property. And it was pretty straightforward. And of course, back then, there wasn't so many cooling measures. So people who have the money, they can buy property 2, property 3, as much as they want, without thinking whether they have to do the timeline planning. As long as they have money, they can buy the second, third without paying APST. So that was what people were doing back then, and it was more transactional. And as and when they want to sell, and then they can do the purchase at the same time. And exercising wasn't an issue because there wasn't APST, as I mentioned. So it was pretty straightforward. But now, with a lot of cooling measures in place, it makes everybody harder to transit from one property to another without having planned carefully. Reason is because, for example, there's TDSR, there is loan LTV to restrict borrowing, and of course this is for the better good of the property market. So with all this in place, and of course ABSD, if you are planning to buy without selling first, these are the things that restrict everyone from transiting from one property to another property. So it makes things more complicated, in short. And of course, with information readily available nowadays, it's very different from the past. The past, our parents' era, they'll just call agent, buy, sell, just like that. And they don't need any much more extra advice to do all this timeline engineering and planning and progression. But in today's era, there's so many information online sharing about how to make more money from your property, and people are generally much more aware than the previous generation. So this is the reason why we have to transit from just being a buy-sell agent to someone that helps our clients plan properly from one property to another property, or to accumulate more properties depending on their financial circumstances and personal goal in terms of their portfolio. So I think this is where it's very much different from the past. Yeah. So this is why I stand out in this sense.
That's interesting. So was there a specific client situation, a moment in your career, where you realized that what people actually needed wasn't just someone to close a deal, but someone to help them think clearly about their decisions?
Yes, actually I was selling one property in Thomson, and what happened was a buyer came along, and then I was just browsing, taking a look, and I probed a bit more into what they really need, because my style has always been to ask for the intent, the direction, or the objective of that particular family, what they are planning to do, what is their priorities, and what do they actually want out of making this decision of sell and buy. So from there, I was able to sieve out that actually this client wants to make money from the property, and as he's really young, in the early 40s, so he wants to make money from property, yet there are some limitations. For example, have to be close to the current primary school that the children are in, and other than that, he also thought about retirement, forward planning. He wants to make sure that how many times can he enter the market, get out of the market, and enter the market again, to transit between properties until his retirement. So he was pretty clueless at that point, and he was just browsing around, looking, and trying to see which property actually attracts him, and then he just go ahead and buy it. And at that point in time, particularly, he was looking at freehold. Of course, I shared my thoughts about freehold, and then in the end, he didn't buy a freehold property, which he was eyeing. But in the end, the key thing is I helped him to understand and lay out his options, understand his own priorities and objectives clearly, and then lay out the options available for him to make a better decision.
Right. So let's get into the main question. A huge segment of Singaporeans today are sitting in their HDB, financially doing well, and wondering, is now the right time to upgrade? What's the single most common mistake you see them making?
Well, I would say what I encountered quite a number of times is that a lot of HDB owners or even private property owners, they tend to use a large amount of the CPF to clear their loan. So I really come across quite a number of them, and they were saying that, okay, I don't want to have debt, I want to clear my outstanding loan. Whether it's HDB or private, I come across quite a number. And the thing is that when you use CPF to clear your loan, in the event one day you choose to sell that property that you're living in, you have to return the CPF with accrued interest back to CPF, because that is a policy that is the government plan for helping Singaporeans retire comfortably by having CPF. So you have to pay interest on the CPF that you use. So when clients, people use a large portion, if they're just purely paying monthly installment using CPF, that's fine. But when they accumulate a certain amount, 50k, 100k, or even more CPF, they just dump it to clear their existing loan, which isn't ideal, because should they choose to sell that property one day, what they need to return to CPF as accrued interest actually erodes the profits that they will potentially have. So another way you can look at it is that, you see, the bank loan back then, when I'm talking about all this, bank loan was like 1.2, 1.3, or at most 1.5. All right? And in fact, we are at 1.5% now. So back then, I was talking about 2015, 2016, it was also about 1.2, 1.3%. And you use your CPF, which helps you to earn a 2.5% interest compounding to clear a 1.2, 1.3% reducing balance interest bank loan. It just doesn't make sense. And especially when you do it in large sum, the compounded interest that you have to pay back to CPF in future compounds up to be a much bigger amount than if you have cleared pay using your bank loan interest. It's way much more than double. So this is the thing that a lot of people are not aware, and whenever they accumulate a certain amount of CPF, they just dump it to clear the loan. It's just too common, and a lot of people are seriously not aware about that. Yeah.
That's a really good point. Now, you've been through hundreds of transactions over the last 40 years. Can you share a potential landmine that buyers sometimes don't see up front, and why they miss it?
Okay, let's think about 99 years and freehold properties. So I come across quite a number of people say, hey, I'll just buy a freehold property. I'll be aiming for a freehold property. This project is freehold, it's good. Well, I would say it really depends on more factors than just whether it's 99 years of freehold. Okay, freehold doesn't mean that all freehold you buy is definitely a better buy than the 99 years. As I said, a lot of factors come into play. I think in this situation that I'm referring to, the important thing is a lot of freehold projects are, freehold properties are private owned since in Singapore independence until now. So most of them are generally smaller plots of land, and if may, now usually they are all en blocs. That's why you have freehold. So these smaller plots of land, if you rebuild them after en bloc, generally aren't big projects. So you realize there's a lot of small boutique freehold projects. A lot of places, Juche, Teluk Kurau, even Katong area, or you were talking about even Balestier. A lot of all these small boutique projects, they are freehold, and maybe even located in very prime location. But if you look at the transaction statistics and the profitability of these projects vis-a-vis some bigger condos in the same area, you can very clearly see the difference in terms of the capital appreciation, and the transaction volume. These are all different factors that affect whether you can make money from that property or not. But having said that, of course, if for whatever reason there's sentimental value, there's emotion, maybe it's an en bloc owner that wants to buy back that same location, or maybe it's just simply like that project and don't care about making any capital appreciation, or even not even planning to sell in future, perfectly fine, they can go ahead to buy that freehold project. So this is just a case in point that doesn't necessarily means that it's freehold, it's a good property. Just want to highlight this to people.
That's something a lot of people overlook. Another thing that trips up a lot of homeowners is the sequence. When do you sell your HDB or private property? When do you buy? And how do you avoid being homeless in between? Can you break down how you actually engineer that timeline for your clients?
Okay, so I have a framework called the OPTEC framework, OPTEC. The key thing is that it really depends on the individual client circumstances. there's no one right way, one size fits all answer to answer this question. Everybody's individual timeline is different. Every client is all customized and personalized to their needs and requirements. Some may need a 3 months extension, some may not need a 3 month extension. Some when they buy, they are prepared to rent a place for 1 year for temporary stay, or maybe some may even want to sell first, and then after that, slowly take their time to look at the next property without pressure. But most Singaporeans are in a situation where they want to sell and then buy and time it back to back. In this kind of situation, of course, a lot of times nowadays, most Singaporeans will know that they have to factor this potential 3 months extension inside this timeline. So, just a case in point, when you're trying to sell the property, you decided to shift from one house to another, you have to start marketing, but at the same time, you have to start looking. Of course, there are also clients that, I'm not going to sell unless I know what I want to buy. But then again, sometimes when they really find what they want to buy, and then they start selling, the truth is sometimes the property doesn't wait for them. So in that case, the timeline may end up doesn't meet. So usually in such situation, you just have to start marketing and start looking at the same time. Yeah, and then we see how things play out along the way. We can't control what we can't control. You can't control when the buyer will come along and buy the property. You can't control when the other party that is buying or selling, whether they need an extension or not. So there's a lot of management along the way in terms of timeline, depending on the buyers, sellers, individual timeline to meet. So if you're talking about selling, you have to factor the one buying, the buyer's timeline. Then if you're talking about buying, you have to factor the other party's selling timeline. So you have to make sure these three parties' timeline can all meet nicely, and this is where I've come across some people who didn't engage a trusted, very capable agent, went into some problem with timeline issue, and then they have to resort staying at a parent's or relative house temporarily, or even renting a place for short term. Yeah.
That's really useful to hear. Can you give us a real case, without naming anyone, of course, where a client came to you in a situation that looked complicated or even stuck? What was the situation, and how did you help them find a way forward?
Well, I have a client quite a number of years ago, I think it was in 2016 or 17. So, what happened is this couple, they have children. This couple, the wife is Singaporean, the husband is a US citizen. And they were deployed to Singapore for work, the husband for work, and the wife was a homemaker with 3 children. So, in their situation, they actually had an entire container load of furniture that they shipped over by the company, and they want to accommodate a 40-footer container full of furniture inside the home in Singapore. I was telling them that, to accommodate all of this, you really need a big house. But they have a limitation in terms of budget. And at that point in time, their limitation was like 2.5 million. Okay, in 2017, 2.5 million was pretty okay. You can actually buy something downtown, pretty decent space. But still, it was not enough to fit their 40-foot containers worth of furniture. So when they went around looking at different properties on their own, they met different agents, and the different agents give them a few feedback, like for example, you can't buy because your husband is a foreigner, right? You have to pay ABSD, and then so you are only limited to buying condos, and you need this kind of space. The price of the condo in downtown area are bigger. But if you go and buy OCR condos, like whether it's Punggol, Yishun, or Jurong, or anywhere else, HDB estates, the condo sizes are generally smaller and definitely won't fit all their furniture. So they have to buy downtown for like 2,000 square feet kind of condo. And for 2,000 square feet in downtown, even back then, would probably easily cost 2.5 million, 3 over million in fact. And so they were stuck in this predicament. How, Jason, my budget is 2.5, at most I stretch a bit, 2.7, 2.8 possible, but I don't know whether how possible, because this is the amount of cash they have. What can they buy? If they want 2,000 square feet downtown, core central region like Bukit Timah, Orchard River Valley have, but the prices are way over 3 million. They can't afford. And then if they want to buy something in OCR, there's nothing for them. So they were in this predicament, not knowing what can they do. And the fact that they were asking me, but I also asked agent, can I buy landed? They said, I'm a Singaporean, but she's a homemaker, she doesn't have an income. So how to buy landed? So these were all the things that other agents were telling this couple. And when they came to me, and how they came to me was because previously they inquired with me about property renter, and that was 6 months ago. So, but I left a good impression with the wife, and she decided to just, she saved my number, in fact. Even after 6-7 months later, she called me back and said that, Jason, do you have time? I just want to check in something with you. And over a short conversation call on the phone, she was pleasantly surprised to know that actually I have a solution for them. So in the end, to cut the whole story short now, is that I was able to help them buy a landed with a built-in of 3,600 over square feet near the husband's workplace, and it was brand new. And remember, this was 2017, so generally the prices were lower, and the landed cost about 2.88 million. So they have to stretch, and they were very concerned about the financials. And I worked out some strategy for them of how they can actually use some methods unknown to most Singaporeans to actually work this thing out. Of course, legally, everything now in Singapore, everything is all formalized and legal. I was able to come up with a way to actually strategize this financial planning for them, and they were able to buy a 2.88 brand new landed with 3,600 square feet. And they were like, wow, Jason, you are amazing. Because all other agents that they met, and they say they have met so many people who told them that they can't buy anything, they can't buy landed, they can only buy condo, but constrained by the budget. So they were pretty impressed with that.